Are you doing this? All right. First, Metro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm honored to be here, and I want to ask for unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just want to say that I'm really honored to be here today. This is an important topic, wildfires, our firefighters, how noble they are, how much support they need, how grateful we are to them. And so we're devoting this hour to the topic of wildfires. So let me just start by thanking our brave firefighters and first responders for the work they do to keep us safe in all sorts of emergencies. The last few years in Washington state, and frankly the whole west of the United States, have shown that as climate change accelerates, making for hotter days and weakened trees in overcrowded forests, so does the risk of catastrophic wildfires. And all across the West, we are seeing wildfires that have grown in intensity and frequency, and our state has some of the highest risk, what we call fire sheds, in the entire country. We have all felt the impact of wildfires through the damage they've caused in our communities, the smoke in the air that we all breathe and choke on every summer, and for some of us, our homes. And this is especially true in places like Stehekin and Lake Chelan, where the Pioneer Fire just burnt for months in my district, threatening an entire community, causing evacuations. And I am so grateful to the firefighters on the ground in Lake Chelan who worked tirelessly and put themselves at risk to stop the spread of this devastating fire wherever they could and to protect the residents who needed to be evacuated. Now, because wildfires are an ever-increasing threat, I've worked in Congress with members of both parties to address this issue. I want to talk about a couple examples. In Congress, I'm proud to have recently introduced the National Prescribed Fire Act. And I introduced this bipartisan, bicameral bill along with Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon and David Valadao from California. This legislation would invest in hazardous fuels management, including prescribed fire, which is an effective, underutilized method of forest management that helps to reduce the risk of catastrophic fires and choking on smoke in the summer. More specifically, this bill would authorize $300 million in total for the Forest Service and the Department of the Interior to plan, prepare, and conduct prescribed burns on federal, state, and private lands. It would require the Forest Service and the Department of Interior to increase the number of acres treated each year with prescribed fire. And it would establish a $10 million collaborative program based on the successful Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program to implement prescribed burns on county, state, and private land at high risk of burning in a wildfire. This bill would also establish a workforce development program at the Forest Service and Department of Interior to develop, train, and hire prescribed fire practitioners, because not all firefighters do this, and would establish employment programs for tribes, for veterans, for women, and for those formerly incarcerated. It would also require state air quality agencies to use current and often more relaxed, as in our state of Washington, federal laws and regulations to allow larger prescribed burns and give states a bit more flexibility in the winter months when there's low risk of catastrophic fire to conduct these prescribed burns that reduce the risk of choking on smoke all summer. It would also prescribe direction for setting clear standards for prescribed fire practitioner liability and studying the merits of a claims fund to aid with cross-jurisdictional wildfire prevention efforts. I've also worked on some other legislation that goes hand in hand with this. One is the Forest Data Modernization Act, and this bill simply lets us know data about our forests and which ones are at the highest risk for catastrophic fire. And I've also voted for landmark legislation, like the bipartisan infrastructure law, which incorporated many elements of the previously discussed National Prescribed Fire Act, like historic investments to remove underbrush and use prescribed fire to reduce these risks of catastrophic wildfire. As an achievement in my own district, just last year, the Kittitas County Conservation District received $10 million through these infrastructure funds. And investments like this in fire sheds like those in my district make tangible differences and allow communities throughout the 8th District to be better prepared for wildfires. But I have to say that even with these steps, wildfires are a reality now and in the future that we are going to have to grapple with. And I also want to note that in addition to doing prevention, we have a shortage of these first responders, both career and volunteer firefighters right now. They are our heroes, and we need to take care of them the way that they take care of us. And that's why I voted for several bills to increase firefighter pay and benefits, to make firefighting a year-round job, and to get grants to local fire departments so that they can hire and retain new firefighters. Now, wildfires aren't just an issue east of the Cascades in Washington state anymore, a notoriously wet state west of the Cascades. We are seeing these fires in the wet part of our state, including in Olympic National Forest, which is a rainforest. So I will continue to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to push forward meaningful legislation that will keep the 8th District and the entire western United States safe. I want to thank you, and then I'm going to yield to my colleague, Mr. Carbajal, a minute and a half. He is from one of our western states, from California, and Santa Barbara has suffered some dramatic wildfires as well.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to stand with our nation's firefighters, including our federal and wildland firefighters, and to thank them for the tireless and dangerous work they are doing in California at this very moment. In the past week alone, there have been more than a dozen new wildfires in California, totaling nearly 50,000 acres across our state. In San Bernardino, the line fire has burned thousands and has forced thousands to evacuate. The Bridge Fire, the Davis Fire, the Boyles Fire, the Airport Fire, and the Chimeneas Fire in my region near the Carrizo Plain is thankfully nearly contained. But consider this, as Californians have been baking this week in an extreme heat wave, our brave firefighters choose to put on heavy gear and head into that heat. They spend these scorching months cutting down trees, digging lines, and sleeping yards away from these deadly wildfires to keep us safe. And if we don't act soon, Congress is going to thank these brave firefighters for their service with a pay cut. We took a great step in 2021 with our bipartisan infrastructure law, which provided a 50% pay raise to these heroes. But we cannot let that vital provision expire now. The Forest Service predicts that this pay cut and loss of benefits could lead to half of our federal and wildland firefighters leaving their jobs, leaving the entire American West at risk. In closing, I want to thank my friend, Assistant Leader Neguse, for hosting this critical session tonight. Our firefighters have an exceptional champion in you. Let's get this done for our heroes who put their lives on the line every single day. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
I'd now like to yield, thinking again about the southwest of our country, to Ms. Stansbury, my colleague from New Mexico, where they also have suffered devastating fires.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Wildfires are devastating our communities across the country. In fact, just 3 months ago, one of the largest and most destructive fires in New Mexico history tore through Lincoln and Otero counties. Over 24,000 acres were burned, 1,400 structures were lost, over 900 homes were burned to the ground, and hundreds more were lost in devastating floods that have torn through Ruidoso and Mescalero Apache in the months since. These fires will change forever the fabric of our communities. Homes and businesses lost, millions in damages, and years of recovery to come. There is no question that climate change is here, and climate change is intensifying these fires. Their length, their intensity, their frequency, and the events that are coming in the aftermath. We must support our communities. We must support them as they recover from these devastating fires, and we must support them as they chart a future to a more resilient future. That is why I have been working with state leadership to help secure $100 million to recover from the Salt and South Fork fires, why we are fighting to make sure that our communities do not get left behind in the disaster relief funds that we must pass this session here on this House floor this month with the CR. It is why I am leading and co-sponsoring legislation for wildfire recovery and resilience, why I am leading and co-sponsoring legislation to protect and restore our watersheds, and of course, to support our firefighters and first responders. It's why we're working to ensure that FEMA and Forest Service and other federal agencies are held to account and have the tools and resources they need to support our communities. And it is why my staff and all of the people in our communities who are leading are on the ground serving our communities and helping the families who've been impacted by these fires every day, because our communities and their future literally depend on it. And the time to act is now. So let's do this. And with that, I yield back.
I'm so glad that my colleague, Representative Stansbury, mentioned the after effects of these wildfires, because we all think about smoke and we think about forests, but we don't think about what happens when the rain comes and the mudslides that follow that cause so much destruction as well. I'd now like to yield to my colleague from Arizona, Greg Stanton.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schrier, for your leadership on this critically important issue to your state, my state of Arizona, and the entire United States of America. Also to Assistant Leader Nagoose for hosting this special hour. Prolonged drought and extreme heat is causing wildfires across the West. And in my home state of Arizona, things are only getting worse. Last year, more than 150,000 acres burned in Arizona. This year, it's more than 250,000 acres, and the fire season is not yet over. This isn't and shouldn't become the new normal. But wildfires are now breaking records every year, becoming more frequent and more destructive. We need a bold approach to protect lives and livelihoods. That's why I'm proud to support the bipartisan Modernizing Wildfire Safety and Prevention Act, legislation to combat firefighter shortages, including retaining expert wildland firefighters and improve fire response time with updated technology. It also takes steps to address the public health crisis caused by wildfire smoke by establishing a nationwide real-time air quality monitoring and alert system. Containing wildfires is priority number one, but post-fire risks are incredibly dangerous as well. Burn scars after a blaze can lead to life-threatening mudslides and flooding, particularly in rural communities and on tribal lands. One Northern Arizona University study predicted devastating economic losses from post-fire flooding. Even a small fire, when coupled with a typical summer thunderstorm, could cost local and the federal government more than $500 million, and under severe weather events, up to $3 billion in evacuation costs and lost property values. That's why I worked with Congressman Doug LaMalfa from Northern California to introduce the bipartisan Wildfire Response Improvement Act. This bill will update FEMA's Fire Management Assistance Grant and help communities responding to and recovering from wildfires. Thank you very much, Dr. Schrier. I yield back.
Thank you for those comments. I really appreciate that insight, Representative Stanton. And I'm now turning to Representative Torres from California, another Western state. We have a theme here.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague, Dr. Schrier, and also Assistant Leader Joe Neguse for holding this wildfire special order tonight. I rise to speak on the devastating impact that wildfires have in my district in the Inland Empire, Southern California. Right now, there are two devastating wildfires surrounding my entire district. The Bridge Fire that has burned over 4,000 acres so far, and the Line Fire that has burned over 27,000 acres to date. My heart goes out to the families and to all of the communities affected. And I want to thank our firefighters and first responders for their selfless sacrifice, putting themselves in harm's way to save lives. I also want to thank the city of Fontana and all of their employees helping to evacuate as they host families at the Jesse Turner Center. As our region continues to experience record-breaking heat waves, extremely dry conditions, and other unprecedented weather, it is so important to ensure the public has the resources necessary to prepare for these disasters. In 2005, I lost my own home to a fire. I had to live in a hotel and temporary housing for 14 months with my husband, my 3 sons, and my pets, all while running to be the mayor of my home city of Pomona. I know all too well the great financial, physical, and emotional impacts of losing your home in a fire. It is my goal that by raising awareness and providing the appropriate tools and resources to prepare for and recover from fires, we can help people adequately prepare and avoid a similar devastation. That is why I have introduced multiple wildfire and mudslide bills, including my annual Wildfire Preparedness Week resolution to protect and evacuate our communities and educate our communities on the impacts of wildfires. Our federal firefighters do increasingly dangerous work to save lives and protect property, and many of them sleep in cars, tents, and man-made holes when they are responding to wildfires. These shelters fail to adequately protect them or provide the necessary rest and nourishment needed when responding to wildfires. We need to do more to support these local heroes. I urge my colleagues to provide more resources to support these Americans, and since January, there have been over 6,000 wildfires in California with our firefighters on the front lines. We cannot over-prepare or be overly cautious when it comes to wildfires. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Torres. I am so sorry to hear that you lost your own home in a wildfire, and I want to thank you for pointing out Firewise and things that people can do to at least mitigate their own risk, although these fires are out of control. I'd like to yield now to my colleague from Nevada, another state with record hot temperatures, Representative Titus.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker. You are so right. Since Saturday, multiple agencies from several states have been coordinating just south of Reno to fight the Davis fire. Among those on the front line is the Silver State Interagency Hotshot Crew. Just as it sounds, Hotshot Crew. They are a group of brave wildland firefighters who day in and day out put their lives on the line to fight and suppress wildfires. Certainly, we know that climate change, including increased heat, extended drought, and a thirsty atmosphere, is what's been the key driver in increasing the risk and intensity of wildfires in the West, at least over the last 2 decades, when fires have gotten more frequent, more intense, more expensive, and more difficult to put out. And that is true in Nevada, where we've been experiencing record extreme heat. We hit 120 degrees just last month, and that is a record for Nevada, which is always hot, but certainly not 120 degrees. And we have ongoing drought. Now, these conditions have a significant impact on the surrounding environment, and as hotter temperatures increase, they dry out moisture from leaves and branches, and they provide kindling to fuel these more intense wildfires. When many of these wildfires occur, we rely on a response from the federal wildlife firefighters, but they are paid, as you have heard, significantly less than their counterparts at state and local agencies. It's obvious that we need to do more to remedy this situation so we can not only retain the firefighters who are in the force, but can also recruit more to their ranks. That's why I'm proud to join my colleague, Representative Neguse, on legislation to increase the base pay and retirement benefits for wildland firefighters, as well as provide greater access to mental health and wellness services as they put themselves on the line for us. We owe a great debt of gratitude to these heroes, and the reforms that are in this legislation are the least that we can do in response and in return for their service and sacrifice. I want to thank our Nevada hotshot crew and all the firefighting agencies at the federal level who are working together to try and keep our communities safe, and Representative Neguse for his leadership on this important issue, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Titus. I appreciate your sharing your experiences, and I hope those fires are extinguished soon. I'd like to yield now to one of my colleagues who has been an incredible partner when it comes to managing our forests, protecting them from catastrophic wildfire, to really thinking forward about how we use prescribed fire. And I believe that is because Colorado and Washington State face very similar risks. And so I will yield now to my colleague, Joe Neguse.
Well, I thank you, Madam Speaker. First, let me say thank you to my distinguished colleague and classmate from the great state of Washington. Dr. Schrier has been a tireless advocate, for our wildland firefighters, for effective forest management, and ensuring that we make the necessary investments that we know must be made for wildfire resiliency and mitigation. Of course, all of those issues incredibly important to the people of her great state, and as she mentioned, certainly incredibly important to the people of Colorado, the state that I am privileged to represent in the United States Congress. But I in particular want to thank Representative Schrier for hosting and facilitating this opportunity on the House floor for so many of our colleagues, each of whom are leaders in their own right. You heard from them, Madam Speaker, particularly from the Rocky Mountain West and the western United States, from Nevada and from California, from, of course, Arizona and many other states in the Intermountain West, all of whom are grappling with these challenges that have become so prevalent and so pernicious in our part of the country. And I am grateful that House Democrats are working really hard across party lines, because, of course, none of these issues are partisan in nature. Wildfires don't respect political boundaries or jurisdictional limitations. They impact every citizen of the West and every citizen of our country. And it's critical for us to marshal the necessary resources to ultimately address those challenges. The particular challenge that I just want to call attention to tonight, Madam Speaker, is one, of course, that you are familiar with and one that you've heard from many other of my colleagues this evening. The way in which federal wildland firefighters are treated, in my view, by the federal government is patently unfair and unconscionable. For years, we have relied on these first responders, these brave public servants, these courageous individuals to protect our homes, our small businesses, our communities, and our states. They risk life and limb to protect us. I say that having had multiple historic wildfires in my district back home in Colorado. The state's largest wildfire in the history of, the largest wildfire in the history of our state, the second largest wildfire in the history of our state, the most destructive wildfire in the history of our state, all happened within the last 4 years in the congressional district that I call home. I have seen firsthand the sacrifices made by these wildland firefighters, and it is unconscionable that we don't pay them a living wage. Now, we've made a lot of progress because of Dr. Schrier's work, leading the way with others, myself included, to ensure that in the bipartisan infrastructure law that we finally provided a holistic pay structure that compensates our wildland firefighters. Not a panacea, didn't solve the problem, but made progress that we could build on. But instead, unfortunately, right now, we are poised to potentially go backwards. Because as you know, Madam Speaker, those core provisions of the bipartisan infrastructure law that largely codified the executive order that President Biden had issued previously to increase wildland firefighter pay, those provisions, which were enhanced by a variety of other statutory provisions that we were able to enact through the NDAA last year to provide, as I said, more comprehensive pay scales for our wildland firefighters, they are set to expire at the end of the month. The clock is ticking, Madam Speaker, and it is incumbent upon every member of this august body to come together, work together, find common ground, and do what is right by these wildland firefighters. They deserve it. They've earned it. And the time for excuses, in my view, is long past gone. So I'm committed, Madam Speaker, to working with anyone of either party in good faith to address this challenge and to ensure that our wildland firefighters are paid what they are owed. I'm going to keep at it, working with Dr. Schrier and my many colleagues, and hope springs eternal that we will get this done because, of course, the stakes are too high for us not to get it done. With that, I want to say again, thank you and my gratitude to Dr. Schrier for her leadership, Representative Schrier for her leadership, and we'll yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you, Representative Neguse. I cannot overstate what an excellent partner you have been to work with and to fight for managing our forests and for our firefighters. And I just want to say, you know, we all feel, Madam Speaker, we feel that appreciation for our first responders in our hearts, but that's just not enough, that we need to find that in our appropriations as well. Because my colleague, Mr. Neguse, just pointed out, the pay isn't high enough. These are high-risk jobs. We've turned them into year-round jobs for forest management. That's helpful. We've gotten pensions and federal benefits. That's helpful. But think about what they do. Think about what their families go through. Think about housing. How do you find housing when you don't know where the next fire is going to be and when you don't have a salary to support it? And you know, there's a way to combine all of these efforts, higher pay, more recognition, better benefits. Frankly, we should have a path to, and I have co-sponsored this, to allow firefighters to buy into Medicare early. Can't expect people to fight fires until they're 65 years old. It just doesn't make sense. And we also need to, just like we did for veterans, have some presumption that illnesses later in life likely came from inhalation of smoke. I also want to mention that there's a real need to sort of complete the cycle. Like, it's one thing to pull underbrush out, to bring small diameter trees out of our forests in order to protect the forests. But then there's all kinds of uses for those. We need more small diameter mills. We need guarantees from the Forest Service that those small diameter, 8 inches or less trees will go and be processed. We can create cross-laminated timber, and that is strong enough that we could build housing and build it more affordably with materials grown right here at home. There's a cycle there. We can use it for biochar. All of these western states, they're dry too. Biochar will hold moisture in the ground and can help complete this cycle. And I have a business in my district that creates something called wood straw. It works better than regular hay or straw in stabilizing a hillside because it kind of sticks into that mud and allows seeds to germinate more quickly. We can use these products and complete that cycle and make it pencil out financially. I also just want to give a nod to a community in my district, community of Roslyn. And Roslyn, small town, absolutely adorable, sits surrounded by forest. It's one road in, one road out. That's it. And this community is really just waiting for a disaster to happen. But they didn't just sit back and wait. They put in for community project funding and got a good chunk of federal dollars so that they could manage the forests surrounding their town. That means that there could be a catastrophic wildfire, but it would slow or hopefully stop by the time it got near the town. And the community got so involved and excited about this, the forest management, that they each took it upon themselves to firewise their homes. And this has become part of the culture, and it is what we need to do throughout the West to protect our forests and to protect our communities. I don't believe I have any speakers left, and so I just want to emphasize that gratitude to our firefighters and my commitment to continuing to work for healthier forests, for wood products industry, for good environmental stewardship, and for protecting the West and the entire planet from escalating and accelerating climate change. Thank you, and Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you.